So, just a rough go, we're talking about the base or the mortal power system, not the godhood this time around. That's going to contain mana and soul. Those are the only two we have said right now. We're working on more. I say we, I meant me, but we are working on more. The one that's up in the air right now is going to be physical magic, which you can look for examples being from the anime Fire Force. I guess My Hero Academia would also be another good one too, where it has a positive and a negative effect for the power itself. Anyways, the example is getting in. The Vancers are born with physical magic. That is a very rare race in the Grove City that we are currently in. That is my species, so I am not the last one of my kind. But that will be a different later topic when we start talking about the races and sub-races within the city itself. Right now, we're talking about the power system. Now, physical magic. Explaining a little bit about it. You have a physical, or a positive and a negative. Positive being the power you can do, like fire, or any of the elements, really anything. But however strong the positive is, the negative is going to be just the same. Like AKEADA has a cosmic style, where if he throws, he can burn himself by using like a solar flare attack, right? The more you use it, the stronger it's going to get. But also the stronger the negative effect is going to get, which in tandem increases the healing factor that all Vancers are born with as well. So everything gets stronger about it. Right? You can eventually build up a tolerance to the negative effect, where you can use the basics. Like, think you have a what's another one? Novice spells, adept spells, apprentice spells. Would it be? No, it'd be novice, apprentice, then adept, expert, master. Right? So let's think about those 5 levels. You can build up a tolerance for novice spells, apprentice spells, and up to adept. But after that, you're going to get into the territory for the expert and master, where there is no really building up a tolerance for the defect. It's going to hit you, and it's going to hit you hard. Right? It's not going to be at the lower levels. Like you can, like for novice, you can just almost disregard it when you get to that point. Adept or apprentice, same thing. But when you hit the adept tree, like right before expert, you're gonna get the side effect, but it's not gonna be, it'll be like when you first start, like a novice. So apprentice and novice will be out. You'll never have to worry about those again, but once you hit adept, you'll get like the novice style side effects. But it's not to say the expert will have the apprentice style. No, it will still have the expert. That's the expert and master are pretty much going to be your strongest of the strong. So it's going to hit you full. And AKEADA is subject to this as well. Right. So a lot of his physical magic and stuff that he does is usually just enhancing his own body with it. Right, so if he punches you, he's going to hit you with a gravity wave, which isn't going to be very much. It'll be like at the novice up to adept, get slight cracking of his hand. He won't really go all out, because then it'll just hurt him in the process. Right, and that'd be a really dumb thing to do to open up with a master style spell. Like the extreme for AKEADA, right, would be if he unleashes a very devastating attack with his arm. His arm would disintegrate to dust. It can go to that extreme. And it could be his entire body, right? Nothing is safe from it. But that's where the healing factors come in as well. Say he does that with, he hits somebody with a gravity, hits so hard, it disintegrates his arm. His healing factor would then kick in and just start regrowing his arm. But it would take longer. It wouldn't be instantaneous. But his healing factor is pretty powerful. So say if somebody else cuts his arm off and disintegrates it, he can grow it back almost immediately. Granted, it wouldn't be a very pretty sight to see when AKEADA starts forming his arm back. Because he's not human or he's not a human. He's not made of your typical bones, muscles, veins, and then he's a plant. Right. He has no, technically speaking, he has no brain, he has no lungs, he has no stomach. He's ideally, if you strip away the outer layer, he's going to be a mass of vines, roots, and mycelium all spread around. And at the core, just like the other Vancers, he will have a core. Now, I'm getting really off topic in talking about the biology of AKEADA, not the power system that we're supposed to be talking about. So I apologize for that, but I'm going to continue with this real quick. So, he's a mass of vines, right? Vines, roots, mycelium. All Vancers and all Protherians, not all Protherians, because this world is Protherian, so everybody who's born here would be considered a Protherian, so it's not the right answer anymore. So I need to figure out a new name for the Vancers. Spoiler, the past Satches and Vancers no longer exist, so you can say that AKEADA is the last Vancer that will ever be born. The life forms that will be born on the pods now will be a hybrid between a Vancer and a Satch. So it'll be more in line with, what's a good example to use? What's a good example? Superhuman, like Captain America. No. They'd be a little bit stronger than a Captain America would be. I'm talking about like base MCU, not like the comic books. I'm talking about the ones that were in the movies. Yeah, like Black Panther, Captain America, superhumans. Satches were really weak, Vancers were extremely strong, right? Anyways, AKEADA is a very unique Vancer now, because of the cosmic and stuff like that. His core is so... Think about it like this. There are two types of vines within AKEADA now. You have the normal ones, that makes up to everything that you pretty much see. But you have the core vines, that everything is stemming from. But the difference between the core vines is that they are being sealed by the other vines. Meaning his core is now a universe. And that is pretty much, so he has a universe inside himself that has a gravity pushing in on itself so it doesn't collapse. And then when he finally does collapse, it's when he's unleashing his full power. And he becomes a cosmic style entity. It'll still look the same, but more spacey looking, right? But that's where he stores all the stuff that he generates, because he can't like have it on himself, right? Because can you imagine? Because he has, every time he devours somebody, he gains their fuel and starts generating it, right? Because he can't do anything complex with it, so he just generates. He's a battery. He's just a giant battery that can only unleash it as its raw and purest form. So he has to store all of it somewhere, right? So he just funnels it all into his inner universe. You'll hear being references later, he refers to it as his stars. So if he's using just magic, he'll switch to his mana star. But that also falls in line with his boons that he can bestow upon somebody else, right? Say he blesses a wizard that uses magic with his mana star boon. They will gain, I guess it would like visual representation. Think of a big star, and every time he gives somebody a boon, it will then become a smaller planet. It'll still be another star, just rotating around it, right? That little star that's rotating around the bigger star will be a boon that he's blessed on someone else. And that can go for any of the stars that he has. These stars will be not necessarily sentient, but when somebody is meditating to gain power from said boon, they would be interacting with that star and not AKEADA himself. So they wouldn't know that AKEADA would be giving them the boon. It'd be more like they would be directed to the star. So it's in a web, AKEADA would be the center, and they would go out to a star of said boon's choice that they use, and it would branch out again. So they would be in contact with the star and not AKEADA himself. Does that make sense? I guess that is considered an on topic, because that is a power source, and boons are a third, or like the third category of inner and outer force. You get inner and outer, then boons. Boons can influence outer or inner. So anyways, yeah, I really derailed on what I was supposed to be talking about today. Spoiler on what I was talking about before, Dev, the spear guy that he was going to fight in the mountain region was a metal user. So they generate and create metal from pretty much their own blood, right? But they bleed metal. So they bleed metal, form it into a spear, and then you would throw it. And remember, he was throwing a bunch of these spears. So it was draining him of his life force, he was getting weaker, but he had the physical strength to just chuck it, and it would go solid. And his healing factor would be his own blood as well. Say you cut his skin. That, I guess you could say, is like two types. You have an offense and a defense. His healing factor wasn't necessarily a healing factor, more of a defense factor. You cut him, the cut would bleed a little bit, then immediately harden.
You wouldn't really be able to pierce that again.
So the more you cut him, the harder he's going to be to defeat. Because he's not necessarily going to get heavier, because that's already existing within his own body. So that's one of the healing factors that the old Vancers had access to. the new Vancers are going to be lesser than what they were in the past. So, like, a new Vancer can be born with identical powers and healing factor to AKEADA. Right, but they'll never be on that level at which he was born with. Then again, AKEADA didn't even know what powers he had when he was born with to begin with. But he was born with the cosmic. So in the past, if you knew, Dev, that he had the ability to hit somebody with a star or crush them with gravity, he probably would, right? Like, that lightning guy wouldn't have even been a threat. But I didn't know. Nor that vine spider. But back to the power system. So we talked a little bit about boons. Right? I guess you can say boons would be more of the faith, right? I think that'd be a better way to put it. You have the inner, you have your outer, and you have your faith. Inner, again, being your inner force, either your inner mana, your inner soul, stuff like that. Outer would be the mana around you, or the spirits around you, right? You can either ask the spirits for their help, gain their blessing that way, or you can use mana in your spells, gather the mana around you. You could use inner and outer at the same time to further enhance it. But both are different practices, right? So you would have meditation for the inner soul users, looking inwards upon yourself. I guess mana magic users would be the exact same. Meditation would be a good form to use for inner force. And in the outer, you'd have to focus more on your surrounding rather than your inner. So when you're looking in, when you're looking out, you can't really look both at the exact same time, so you have to train both separately. I'm trying to think. The only unique one would be the physical magic. But people can't really be born with that. Well, I guess when you think about half-breeds, like if someone was born half Vancer and half elf or dwarf or whatever, then they could be born with a... Well, they would get the 3 from the Vancer. They would get the healing factor, and then a positive and a negative. On top of what the parent would be. Before anybody asks, no, Vancers are not male nor female. But typically speaking, I guess it would have to be a mother. The Vancer would have to be a father, because they don't have... No. Like AKEADA, they can this is race talk. We'll get back to that later. Put that off to the side. Back to what we're talking about. If somebody was born a half-born, then they can get the physical. Yeah, then they can get the physical, but that's far in between right now. So it's really, honestly, just magic and soul. There was a third one though. What was it? You would think blood magic, right? Focusing on life force, but that would still fall into a soul category, because soul being life force. Dang. Yeah, I don't remember what it was, so let's just focus on the two that we have. So magic really falls in line with just your traditional magic, right? The inner and the outer. Inner being, you can always develop the inner more. You can, when it comes to developing the outer, let's talk about the outer first, because the inner is a little bit more to it. Outer is just you pulling in magic from your surrounding. You can pull it from the out into yourself, but you'll have to release the magic that you gathered from your outer. You can't really store it within yourself for too long, because it's kind of like a difference. It's a different kind. It's more nature, right? I would say it's more in line with nature. So say you're in a forest, you're gonna get more nature magic than you would, say, fire. If it's a rainforest, you would get nature and water style magic. There is, I guess, wisps weren't the right one I'm looking for. You got your nature spirits too, which would fall in line with more of a magical being rather than a soul being. Think about the old, when you're thinking soul, think more in line with talismans, stuff like that, right? Ghosts, the fallen warriors from the past. Because I wouldn't say fairies would be a... I wouldn't say fairies, because fairies is going to be like a smaller race within the city you have here. There's all kinds of races within the city. Like, there's heaps. It's getting hot. Take my jacket off. It's not fairies. There is... just call them the elemental. The elements. Whatever. The elements life forms. Right, you got your fire elementals, you got your water elementals, earth elementals, and nature elementals. I guess nature elementals would be considered Spriggans, right? Earth ones would rather just be golems. And then you got your subsections when you come, the golems. Yeah, I just call them golems, or the elementals. Now, with the elementals magic being an outer force, you can make contracts. Contracts would be a different than a boon. Boons fall in line with the godhood system. Right, so if you access a boons, you will be locked out of the godhood. You'll never be able to achieve it. But making contracts and gaining them that way. Not boons, but contracts would be different. Like say you make a contract with a being that's just about to break through to the next belt. If you don't want to talk about belts, you want to watch the past stream, you can find it on the YouTube, right there on YouTube that I have. I don't know if I have that link. Anyways, you can still achieve godhood even though you have a contract with someone, because a contract would be different than a boon. They're on the opposite sides of the spectrum when it comes to power in outer force. You're not making contracts depending on the said contract, right? So let's get two things out of the way. You have elemental contracts, and you would have contracts with, on the spiritual side would be contracts with demons or something like that, right? That is one life form that can give contracts on the spiritual side of things. And on the contract side of the magic would be the elementals. Now, if there is, the only difference with the contracts when it comes to spirit is that you can have contracts between two lesser. You can have as many contracts as you want, but spiritual-wise, you can soul link with somebody to share power, if that makes sense. In terms of magic, you can't really resonate in soul link with someone. That's one thing you can't do. So there is different methods for each type of power. There is a third one to go into the triangle of the power system, but I just don't remember what the third one was. It's gonna bug me until I figure it out. I guess the third one that I was thinking of would be the physical. That one's not quite. That one's more. That one is just all inner. That one's not outer or anything like that. It's more of the straightforward path. We'll explore on that one later. The physical one. Don't know if it should be locked behind just the Advancers can use it, because I would give them a head on pretty much everything, right? Because Advancers, I'm a Advancer. I have access to magic and spirit. And the physical. But I think the physical should be... No, I gotta change that. How would one access or gain access to the physical? It's not gonna always be called physical magic. It's got to be called something else. I just don't have a name for it. But it's got to be locked behind something. Like maybe a ritual? A pact? Maybe a pact. A pact with what, though? Can't be a pact with a demon. That'd be more online with the... I guess the soul side wouldn't be considered a contract. It'd be considered more of a pact. Right? I guess it could still be considered a contract. Huh. Anyways, back to the magic side. On the elementals. there's a bunch of different ways you can go about magic in and of itself. You can be more on the respectful side of the elements, right? Where you go out and you talk to them and make contracts and all that. Or you can be more on the domineering side, and rather than making contracts with them, you force them to bend to your will. Rather than working with, you make them work for. Right? Does that make sense? And same thing with the spirit side. You can have ghostly allies or demon allies. You can either have work with them, or you can force them to your will. Right, it'd be more of a servant and master style relationship between them if you go the forceful route rather than the there's a name for it. What was it? Either refer to the contract being on the respectful side and the pact being on the domineering side for now. It's not the correct terms for it, but I'll have to figure that out later. I don't remember what it's called. Yeah, so we'll just refer to pacts being the dominating side. But of course, this is all the outer. Right, when you're talking inner, there is no pacts you can make to force somebody to bend to your will. There is no contracts you can make to gain more power. Right, because you make a contract with somebody, they're going to lend you their power, but it's going to be their power, it's not going to be your power, it's not going to be something you can grow. Granted, their power might grow, so they might be able to lend you more, but it's all depending on the contract and the strength of the one you make the contract with or pact with. Typically speaking, if you make a pact with somebody, you're going to be stronger than them anyways. So that can be, I guess, contracts are going to be more in line with people who focus mostly on outer force rather than inner force. And people who focus on inner force is usually going to be people who make pacts with the entity, whether it be the soul side or magic side, because they're going to be stronger. Maybe it's not going to be all inner force users or all outer force users, right? Like, say an outer force user makes a contract with someone, then he uses the power they make that contract with to force a pact with something else. It can go all the ways. It really depends on the individual. And the pact that they make. Now back to, so we talked about the outer force. There's a bunch of different elements out there. There's also the sub-elements that you have in them. I lost my train of thought and I was going somewhere with it. Let's talk about the inner force. I didn't... A mariachi song? Huh. Alrighty. So... very fitting music, right? It caught me off guard. Good. We'll turn it up a little bit too. There we go. Talk about other worlds as a mariachi band plays. So, Inner Force. Inner Force is gonna fall more in line with more of the close range individuals. Because Outer Force will take longer to do things. Because you gotta gather the mana that's around you rather than in you. So Outer Force is definitely going to be stronger on the range side of things. While Inner Force can do range combat and Outer Force can do melee combat as well. But Inner Force typically is going to be stronger with the close range. They're both fairly good at mid-range, but each one's going to be able to excel at different things, right? Oh, it's still going. I thought the song was over. So, in terms of training, when it comes to Outer Force, it will be more of the capacity at which you can take in and increase the reach at which you can pull from. Meanwhile, Inner Force is pretty much going to be building your own well of increasing your own soul power or increasing your own magic power. It falls in line with what I was saying before about how AKEADA stores all of it within his own universe and treats it as stars. So he has a soul star, a mana star. He has those two. There are subsects that people use, like in terms of soul being life force. Somebody can use their own blood as a fuel source in some of the magic that they use. Right? Like blood weapons forming out of their own blood. It's still using their soul force. The soul force is just chi, chakra. It's your life force. There is blood magic on the magic side of things as well, so they can duplicate each other. A lot of it's going to fall in line with similarities. It just all depends on what fits your character more. Soul people tend to be more spiritual. Meanwhile, magic users, a lot of the time, are going to be more... first thing that comes to mind is grimoires, in terms of knowledge. Spellcasters will have grimoires, meanwhile, the soul user won't have grimoires. They don't have access to grimoires. Now, in Faith, right? Faith is a whole different thing. Because Faith would be more the divine. You can... For Faith, I guess Faith would be the third one. No. Because the way I see it is Faith is going to be is closely intertwined with boons. Boons being a connection to the gods. Now, one can, if their faith in themselves is strong enough, that they can emulate the same people who use boons. Like, they give themselves a boon. You know? Their faith in themselves is so strong that they can act similar to the holy. It's weird to explain. It's hard to put in words. And in the end, when I look at holy, I think of light magic. So it's going to fall in line with the mana side of the power scale. You'll have your light magic, which is pretty much holy. And you'll have your dark magic, which is death magic. Right? Necromancy and stuff like that. It's when necromancy would be the soul user butting heads with a magic user. And the magic user overtaking said soul. Right, because they're not going to be able to play nice to each other all the time. Let's be honest. Meanwhile, that can also be said where a soul user seals. Because no matter what, somebody's always going to have some form of soul force. Whether they use it or not, strengthen it or not. A soul user can take said soul, even if it's just a sliver, inject their own soul force into somebody to seal their magic. Meanwhile, on the magic side, you can bend somebody's soul in terms of necromancy. So they're going to clash from time to time in terms of things you can do. If that makes sense. I'm gonna hit next on this song. Where'd that mariachi one go, man? That was pretty good. That one was pretty good. Where were we? Oh, we were talking about necromancy and soul sealing. We just talked about that. Right, so the one thing we haven't really talked about would be pretty much the warriors or barbarians. A lot of the times, though, the warriors, barbarians, so normal fighters, they will still have magic and soul, but they are primarily focusing on the inner force, not necessarily use it to cast spells or anything like that, to seal or anything. It's mainly, it'd be more considered arts. It would primarily be considered weapon arts. Rather that be a monk going in with martial arts, a knight going in with his swordsmanship, samurai in his swordsmanship, a barbarian with their axe. Anything to really enhance their own physical prowess. I guess that would be, that's not really the third. Not the third one. The third one needs to be the Vancer's physical magic that gets introduced to the city for people to use. Because the physical magic can branch out to a lot of different things that are connected to it. Like, say, I guess I can use AKEADA for an example, right? He is a cosmic force user. Train hard enough in it, you'll get access to gravity. Because previously, he was only really able to use star. Like, he can throw stars at people, he can send solar flares at people, shoot gamma bursts at people. And at some point, it's going to unlock a new sect of it that's going to be gravity. Which he has access to, and then another subsect on top of that, which is matter. And it's not going to be like reality warp or anything like that, because I really think reality warping is kind of lazy. Right, your imagination could still be fuel, but in terms of turning, alchemy is still a thing in the city. It's something else entirely. It's more on the alchemist side of things. I personally just don't like reality warping. At all. So much so that pretty much that because in the past, not really in the past, one of the drawbacks to the physical, I guess, arts. We'll have soul, we'll have mana, we'll have arts. That's what we're gonna call. We're just gonna call them arts. Or aura. We can call them auras. No. Aura arts? Aura arts is fine. It's a work in progress. We're just gonna refer to it as aura. Aura arts. Aura arts. Aura arts. It's not really an aura. It kind of isn't an aura. So anyways. Typically speaking, the aura arts user does not really have access to long-range control. They have a bubble around them that they project. It's not really something that can be seen, it's more of a control, where they can control. Say you have a fire or arts user, right? They can control those flames within that bubble, and they'll never go out. So it's primarily focused on a close range style of combat. So aura arts does work, because you can control all within your aura of said thing. So an aura flame user goes against a magic flame user. It's pretty much going to be a win for the aura arts user if said mage only uses fire spells. As soon as their fire spells enter the aura user is pretty much going to gain control over that fire. But if the aura user does not have access to magic, the magic that fueled said fire can still penetrate. It will just lose its fire element aspect that's been added to the magic or to the mana. So in return, say you throw a fire javelin at a fire arts user, the fire will disperse, but within said fire lance, there will be a thin line of mana that can still pierce the aura user. If that makes sense. Does that make sense? So think about it like a banana, right? The fire around the fire lance would be the banana peel, while the mana within the fire lance would be the banana. That's pretty much what I'm getting, and that goes for all things. That goes for all magic. Now there are soul arts aura users as well. There's a bunch of aura art different style users. And like I was saying before about the cosmic, it can branch.
There's so many different things that are.
So, like if you're a storm aura arts user, it can branch to lightning, or it can also branch to thunder. Or you can have the speed of lightning and the strength of thunder. Or say again, if you're a fire aura, so you can burn extremely hot, where you can then gain control over, I guess, thermodynamics. You can take the heat out of something as much as you can put it into something. So typically it usually branches off into two separate things. Right, like the cosmic one for AKEADA would be matter, star, and gravity. It wouldn't really be star, would it? No, it'd be cosmic bodies, matter, and then gravity. No, space. What am I talking about? Matter would be stars and stuff like that. Space, gravity. Because again, AKEADA is a weaver. He pulls space to make tunnels. That's one of his jobs in the city. Magic can emulate space control as well. It's not just for aura arts. Yeah, that makes sense. What were we talking about? Oh, yeah, the aura arts. The aura arts is pretty much the stronger of the close range. Doesn't have any real, right? You can, an aura's user, go back to the lance type deal, right? If you have the accuracy, right? If you have an aura arts user, you have the accuracy to throw something, to hit it, you can. Typically speaking, a magic user guides it to its targets, like say magic missile. Right? Say you have a aura's user that can just send energy blasts, something similar to magic missile, right? Send energy blasts out. As soon as it leaves the bubble, they no longer can control its trajectory. So if it is a wild spell, it will just go all over the place. Like an RPG, it just sways off to the side. Meanwhile, a magic user can control it from point A to point B. For an aura arts user, there is point A, point B, and point C. You can control it to point B, but you'll never control it to point C. Meanwhile, the magic user can control it from point A to B, or to C, D, and so on and so forth. Same thing with soul arts users. They have more control over it, is what I'm getting at. Meanwhile, magic soul can excel both close range, mid range, to far range. Physical or aura arts users only really have access to close range. Hence why AKEADA's main way of fighting is up close and personal. He doesn't have the capability of doing full range combat. He can swipe and send out solar flares to go everywhere for wide sweeping. So, for arts user, their range attacks is mainly going to persist of AoE hits rather than single target hits. While magic soul users can do both single target and AoE, where arts users can only do AoE attacks from a range to mid range. Now, in terms of the aura, the bubble that surrounds the individual, can expand over time. The more they use it, the more it's going to get, but it's never going to get to a point where it is ever reaching. Now, being big, being tall, being long, that is going to affect the aura bubble. So say a giant to a fairy, right? The fairy's aura bubble will be significantly smaller than, say, a giant's aura bubble. So it is better to be bigger for aura arts than it is to be smaller. If that makes sense. The aura arts does favor the bigger and stronger rather than the smaller and weaker. So aura arts, back to what we're talking about for the warriors, the barbarians, and stuff like that, where they fall in line. Well, they can fall in line with magic, spirit, or aura arts. It really depends on what you want, right? You could be a spellblade that focuses primarily on close range magic style combat, enhancing your own body with pretty much buff spells, right? Same thing with the soul. The physical arts, depending on how we do it, this is kind of off topic, because usually somebody is born with physical arts. It was AKEADA and all Vancers in old Pro Tour. Not really sure how it's going to be distributed now, and that is not something I know, because it's only ones that are born with it are Vancers. Either you're a pureblood or a half-blood. It doesn't really matter. It's going to be the same strength between a half-born and a pureborn. I'm not too sure how to go about distributing it that way, because it's not necessarily something that can be taught in terms of a spell or a martial art technique. It could be like a coming of age ritual that could be performed, maybe. We'll come up with something. Maybe a ritual. It sounds about right. If you want to do it, you can opt it. We'll talk about that later. So, and back to the barbarian and stuff like that, right? You can really go either way. You can be on the soul side, where you use your soul to strike somebody else's soul directly, or you can send waves of soul force to attack. Same thing with magic, right? You can conjure flame blades, lightning blades, or pull a sword from the earth. Honestly, it's really just depending on what you want your character to be. Falls back in line with imagination is your power. Well, not really your power. It's to let your imagination run wild on what it can really be. Because on the magic side of things, you have runesmiths, right? That use. Now we're going to be talking a little bit about the crafting and the power system. So there are magical items, right? The dwarves in this world just love their runesmith thing. They love making the metals and then crafting, like chiseling runes into their work to enhance it even further. right? It's like enchanting. But enchanting to be a little bit different. You can put rune work and enchanting on top of it. Usually speaking, the elves like they're enchanting more than the rune working. It's hard. It'd be hard to interweave or enchant a runic inscribed blade. It would be hard to squeeze in that. Now, on the soul side of things, right, it comes back in line with the sealing, right? You can seal souls within certain blades and stuff like that. But another thing, no, that's about it. No, I was gonna say talismans. You can use talismans on blades as well. Like it'd be somewhat similar to enchanting. Primarily, you would wrap a talisman around the handle to imbue said like a flame talisman, or like if you have a flame spirit. Like if you contract with a flame spirit, you can wrap a flame talisman around the hilt of a blade or a handle of an axe, whatever, to imbue fire properties to said blade. So it'd pretty much be equivalent to a spell sword, right? But a person who uses hand-to-hand can also do that, right? They can wrap their hands with a flame talisman and they wouldn't burn them, but when they punch somebody, you'll also burn them. So the talismans would protect themselves against their own power? Maybe turn music down. I didn't mean to skip it. I'm going to just turn it down a little bit. Does that make sense? Like, when it comes to soul, their own soul force cannot hurt them. Meanwhile, a spellcaster can burn themselves with their own flames if they're not careful, while a soul user can ignite themselves on fire, but never take their own fire damage. Meanwhile, the same flame that is covering them can harm somebody else. So think about that image. Think about like in Dragon Ball Z when they power up, they get that aura around them in flames, right? A Soul Arts user can do the same thing and keep it ignited without hurting themselves, because it'd be actual flames, not like just a visual representation of their energy flowing around them. And they can use it to attack. So it could be both offense and defense style for a Soul Arts user. So what I'm getting at, Soul Arts users' talismans are the equivalent of a spellcaster's grimoires, or scrolls, or staves. You know, I was originally talking about barbarians, knights, and stuff like that, and then I went off back to the magic end, so I ramble a lot, and so I derail myself too much. I blame getting overly excited. Having an idea and just running with it. Because if you guys didn't know, I'm actively coming up with all this as we are talking now. Because this whole part that we're doing is not pre-existing like AKEADA's past. That's all been played out and kind of just sitting in my head. But all of this that we're talking about now is just coming about, except for the aura arts. That was the old one that I had. That's part of AKEADA's past. So if I derail, I'm sorry. I'm just coming up with ideas and running with it. Building on the world that we have growing now. That's why I ramble. A lot. Anyways, back to Knights and Barbarians. They're pretty much the melee classes, right? The ones that don't really focus on range combat, it's just pure attack. Now, what I started going off of, and then I ended up derailing into a bunch of different topics. The fighter, knight, barbarian, all of them, they still have inner force, being soul, magic, or anything like that, right? They still have access to that. It what can fuel their weapon arts, their martial arts, whatever. So pretty much they channel their inner force power into their weapons and attack with it like that. You know, to enhance their cutting power. Enhance, like they're a spear user, enhance their thrusting power. Or if they're a tank user, a shield user, they can enhance their shield to take more hits. But usually speaking, it's not going to be magic. It's not just magic and not just soul. It's going to be a mix between both of them. So it's not just going to be one or the other. It can be one or the other if they want to focus more on being a magic knight or a soul knight. Right, it just all depends on what they want. There are different branches they can go, or they can just stick to just honing their own physical prowess, which in return would increase both their inner magic and inner soul force. It's just not going to be at a more steady rate as, say, you would focus solely on your inner magic force or your inner soul force. Now, I like to think the inner, like say a fighter goes more on the soul side of things, right? I like to think of them more in line, say, characters from Bleach. It's not like having a transforming sword or a Bankai and a Shikai. Not something like that. But when I think of a Soul Knight, that's kind of where my mind goes. And when I think a Magic Knight, I think of an armored user with, or an armor-cladded user with rune-inscribed armor and weapons. Because when you're using a rune-inscribed weapon, you have to fuel said runes with your inner force anyways. And the same thing with the talisman user. If that makes sense. I started to derail again. So anyways, they can use their inner force, either one or both of them, to increase their physical prowess. This is what I'm getting at. Increase their speed, increase their power, and increase their defense and how much damage they can take. It can also pretty much defend them. So think about it as like they're a barrier, right? They're using their inner force as a barrier rather than using it for purely offense. Granted, it's a offense and defense style. They're enhancing their body, and doing so would also increase their durability. If that makes sense. So if anybody is new here and doesn't know what I am talking about, I am talking about pretty much the story that I am building, or pretty much we are building now. It's not just a me thing, it is a we thing. I'm gonna get a thing set up in Discord. Well, it's not just I. There's going to be something set up in Discord. I'm still working on it, messing with some things, like the channels and stuff. But at some point, it's going to be open up for everybody to go in to as well. So we'll be able to talk more there on everything, but it's not ready just yet. Still playing with some things. What are we talking about? Oh yes, the Interforce users for fighters and stuff like that. So again, it is primarily going to be focused on enhancing themselves to achieve pretty much inhuman feats, right? Like going so fast that you break the sound barrier to make a sonic boom. Like a sonic boom slash, right? You know, like those typical moments when you see an anime where the person sheathes their katana, gets into a stance, and they're just on the other side with their sword drawn. Pretty much something like that, you know? That's an easy way to think about it. Or somebody getting hit so hard they fly through buildings just to slide on the ground and just get away with maybe some broken bones. Meanwhile, if they didn't have the inner force protecting them, they just get annihilated. You know, because they can defend against slashes, pierces, and strikes. Granted, it depends on your own inner force at how much it can withstand. So it all depends on the user, again. That was Soul and Magic style close range combat. Now, in terms of the Aura Arts, Aura Arts is a little bit different. Okay, it's vastly different, right? The main thing that Aura Arts is going to offer you in terms of physical, it's going to allow you to be able to push further. What's the word I'm looking? What's how I'm looking for? Because it's not like an outer shell that can be described like Magic and Soul. The Aura Arts does not offer said protection. But what it can offer is, I guess you can go with the three. The pros, the cons, and the health. Or in a regen, right? Depending on, let's just go with that. So when you are gifted, or you gain, let's just say gain, because I'm more leaning towards the ritual side of things for the aura arts. Yeah, I think a ritual sounds about right, like a coming of age ritual. Now, when you're an aura arts user, you're not locked out. Alright, we're gonna go with ritual. So, performing a ritual of the aura arts, it is going to unlock the aura arts for you. But what the aura arts will do, just like it did for AKEADA, it will then consume both your inner mana and inner soul and become twisted together, right? So your soul force and mana force will then become one, and you'll just be aura arts. You'll still have access to spells and stuff, mana, unless you're AKEADA, that you just don't have access to any complex spells and stuff, which sucks. But it's neither here or there. I only bring that up because I'm trying to think, and I'm rambling. Okay, so it can follow the same rules as it was before, right? So if you're an aura arts user, I don't want it to be a random mechanic, right? When you perform a ritual, you and then get shafted and you have what, like a wood aura arts. Granted, wood aura arts can be just completely different. You can go into a moisture side of things or drying. Anyways, I guess the aura art should be a reflection of one's inner forces already, right? So, creating as a young kid, you end up falling more into the fire magic or soul fire, right? You're using those a lot more than all the others. It's more to be more reflection of you. And then when you do the aura arts ritual, you'll then get a flame aura art, right? So it's still something you're going to be born with, but not born with. The aura art you get will be determined by your birth, but can also be in line with your magic and soul arts as well. Yeah, we can go with that. Somebody who's born with the affinity of fire, they'll primarily get a fire aura arts. Yeah, back to what we were saying for the ritual. So, perform a ritual, it's going to be more of a coming of age ritual for young ones, if they want to get the aura arts, because it's going to take over pretty much everything else, right? The magic will, that door will be shut, and so will the soul arts be shut. What I'm getting at is that all the long-range single target stuff like that will no longer be accessible to an aura arts user because they'll have a bubble. They'll get more control of said elements only within the bubble that they have. But like the fire mage can burn themselves with their own fire, and the soul user won't burn themselves with their own soul fire. The aura user will gain access to both magic flames and soul flames, but will not burn themselves. But think about it like that aura user jumps into the air, right? They're just in the air. They then emulate flames. They can ideally become just a floating fireball. They can turn themselves into a fireball. And they'll never let their flames go outside of the bubble, but they have full control of the flames inside the bubble. And it's not a magic fire. It's more in line with a natural fire. They can pump mana into it to increase its firepower, or soul to increase its firepower. but it's more of a natural state of fire. You know? At least that's the way I see it. Well, when I'm thinking about it, that's how I'm looking at it. So I guess it's shutting the door is not the correct phrase to use. They can still go into magic and soul arts, but they will lose access to all of the long-range capabilities of it. But they'll gain more control of it up close, and they would also gain a health regen factor as well. That depends on your affinity, of course. Like if you're an earth user, you would get something different than, say, like a fire user or a lightning user, vice versa. But you'll also gain a defect. You will get much more firepower, yes, but you'll also get a defect. Like, let's just say the fire user. Continue with that one. The more you use your flames, the flames themselves won't burn you. It would be more of a... I want to say mystical, but I don't think mystical would be the right word to use. Either way, it would char yourself. I guess that's the better way of saying it, right? You would get charred, not by your own flames, hard to explain. Because it's not the flames that's burning you. It's not your soul that's burning you. You're just burning. Like for Aki's example, using gravity, it may be a subsect of his ability. I guess the primary ability would be matter. Would it be matter? Kind of, because he's using it to burn up. Anyways, gravity would crack his skin for using it. The gravity itself is not cracking his skin, it's just breaking. Right, like say an earth user is using earth to harden an outer shell around themselves, but their skin itself is then becoming brittle as a fight goes on. Right, or a lightning user. Right, you know those lightning burns that you get? Those may appear on the body as well, getting lightning burn, but not from the lightning itself. It's just something that happens, and their healing factor can't affect it as much as, say, if they were to, like, get struck by somebody else's lightning. It would then heal normally. Meanwhile, their defect would be... I guess the defect would be more of a mystical thing anyways. That's how I'm seeing it. Hard to explain. At least how I'm trying to explain it. Oh! Our song is back, Dev. Not the mariachi one that we listened to before. They have quite the selection on Pretzel now, don't they? Such a fitting song for what we're talking about. It's pretty good, though. I have no idea what they're saying, but it's pretty good. At least the beat to it. Anyways, as you can tell by the power system that is set up, the game, or not game, as I was thinking of a lot of this, even when I was growing up, a lot of it is set up as you would think of a game. Because I was pretty much reenacting it as I was coming up with it when I was younger, just playing it out in my head and swinging around pipes when I was younger. So that's kind of how my mind works when I'm thinking of it now still. I guess what I'm saying is I am thinking of it more functionally than it just being. So it can easily be adapted to, say, like a board game. If that makes sense. The difference in the music is so disorienting. Off topic, I do plan on doing, like, once we get more people here, Dev, I do plan on doing, I don't know if I'm gonna do it like every week, maybe not every week. The more people we get here, the more I'm gonna be more inclined to do, say, like a Q&A section, you know? I think that'd be fun. And also open up the door for maybe more ideas. Maybe refining some of the ideas we already have. I know I'm gonna put one in the section for Discord. I think that'd be a great idea. I know it'd really set the... Not set, that's the wrong word. Focus on that individually. Because usually when I'm thinking, I end up thinking of something else, and I end up derailing off what I'm going for. You know, like how we're talking about now. I kind of derailed and now we're talking about this, and I realized that we're supposed to be talking about something else. So that's pretty much the triangle system of a power system that I would like to employ, right? You got magic, you got soul. But I feel like magic and soul are two completely different styles that go about that can ideally achieve the exact same thing. And then you have the aura arts, which is not really an outer or an inner. It's more of a natural thing. But that can also be... Having the aura arts does not necessarily put you at a disadvantage for, say, physical feats as well. You can get just as strong with aura arts rather than... So, okay. I guess that's a better way of putting it. So, for mana and soul, that's a good way of thinking about it. What is a good way? Because aura arts is not necessarily enhancing. Because if something is being enhanced, you would think it would eventually run out. For aura arts, once you achieve it, it stays. So I'm trying to think of it visually as mana being more of a coating, and the soul being more of what is the mana one is good. I think I like that. I think about it like as a barrier that goes over you. You're enhancing yourself with magic that has to be constantly fed to persist. So think about it like a barrier around the body, like a thin layer. I think about it like an outer mana skin. That's a good way of putting it. Like a layer of skin, enhancing your physical strength, enhancing your durability. And I guess the soul would be more infusing with the body itself. It's enhancing. It's more of an enhancement rather than a cover. If that makes sense. And then the soul arts is not a cover nor an enhancement. It's literally a physical increase. So it's a more of a persistent, where there's nothing you need to fuel to keep it going. It's pretty much like bodybuilding. No, I guess that's right. It's like you're getting stronger by lifting weights and just getting stronger that way. But of course, ideally you'd have to keep doing it to keep that strength up. I guess it's still the same thing. So I guess Order Arts would be more of a physical path that does offer a healing factor to compensate the less protection, because you can still become pretty durable with just physical stuff that way, but it's going to be a lot more painful, right? If that makes sense. So rather than protecting yourself with a suit of metal, like an iron armor, well, not iron armor, plated armor, right? So magic would be a full plate armor set, right? The soul arts would be more of a chainmail piece. Meanwhile, these Aura Arts would just be ordinary clothes in terms of durability. No, it still doesn't sound right. It still doesn't sound right. So anyways, healing factors for Aura Arts, typically speaking, all fall along the same route. No, I was overthinking it. They don't fall around the same route. It really depends on the element that you currently have. Your Earth, it's mainly going to be a coating type heal. Right, it will heal under said, like the metal user from way back when gets cut, it's gonna form a metal skin over it, right? Say they lose their entire arm, it's not gonna just seal up where the cut happened. No, they will instead pretty much grow a metal arm that they can still use at will, because it's gonna be there, or arts, they control all that's in there anyways. But it's gonna be like, I think, phantom limb, right? You lose an arm but you can still feel it, and that you still think it's there, you still try using stuff like that. It's pretty much that, where you can manipulate around it, but no matter what, you're gonna see and feel your arm under it anyways. Say like they lose their arm, they get their metal arm and they make that metal arm into a bladed arm, right? Under that metal, or earth, or whatever, their arm will be regenerating. So they can ideally grow it back. Now, it can, depending on said life form, it can be a good thing, right? As long as they don't lose their head, they can ideally survive. Because say an Oryx user gets a hole blown through their chest, a lot of the time their Oryx will, I guess, simulate, like say they lose their lungs. The Oryx will then, depending on their healing factor, cover said where their lungs are, and then become their lungs. Or their heart, right? They get a spear through the heart, and their heart's just gone. And say they're a fire user, fire would be spewing out of said hole in their chest, and then the fire flames itself would become their heart until it regenerates back. There is limits to this because again it's going off of their life force. And if they can keep going, then it will keep going. I guess life force and will is what I'm getting at. But if they lose consciousness, then that's it. So if they lose their head, it's game over. If that makes sense. Terrible at explaining things, I know. But I hope it makes sense. I know what I'm getting at. They could use, it also depends on said race as well. Like for the regeneration of a Vancer is different from, say, a dwarf, right? Because plant people don't really have bones. Let's use AKEADA for example, right? The core roots make up the structure for the other roots to wrap around to make the body. Like, talking more on AKEADA side of things, high side of things, the fur and skin you see is mycelium. It's not actual fur nor skin, it is a thick layer of hide. Yes, but it is mycelium more than anything else. And under that is just pretty much roots and vines. It doesn't have a normal brain of what you would say an elf, a dwarf, or even a demon has. They're more into their core, but since AKEADA's core is his inner universe as well, you can also make the argument that AKEADA is not really there, but is there. He exists outside his universe, but also inside his universe. If that makes sense. I'm getting off topic. So, say you take off one of AKEADA's arms, right? His healing factor is kind of just a white hot, where it burns so intensely because the cells are regenerating so fast that it turns white hot. But that's when his race comes into play. Turn this down. So, at the injured site, a mass of roots and vines would burst out. Like, he loses his arm. Vines and roots would then, if he can't, okay, give 2 examples. Say you cut his arm off, the arm falls to the ground, right? The arm is still there. He can pick up his arm and then reattach it. The vines would then wrap around each other and just heal. It would be much faster than, say, he is to regrow an arm altogether. So, in a terms of him having to regrow altogether, the core roots would then burst out to form, think of a skeleton hand, while other vines burst out of his shoulder as well, but they'll be flailing about. If that makes sense. And then they'll eventually wrap around the arm, and then the mycelium would kick in. So you can argue that he has 2 types of healing he does. He has the more plant-like, and then say you just stab a hole through him. He just has a hole in his chest. It will then burn while you'll see smoke and steam just spew out of it. And it'll just start forming together again. That's in terms of his race playing a part, as well as the Aura Art's healing factor playing a part. Now, say a dwarf or an elf has the same healing factor that AKEADA does. They can pick up the arm and reattach it. Or, if they have to grow it back, you can see the whole arm like starting to reform while it's spewing out steam and smoke everywhere. Like, it would reform as a, almost like it was never gone. Same size and same everything. Of course, the sleeve of the shirt would be gone. But it would burn. It would be hot for them as well. So they would feel a searing pain. And it would be taxing. But yeah, that's what I was getting at. You know, I like the tri power system that we have. Everybody has access to all 3 if they so wish. Like, you can be an Aura Arts user that primarily focuses on soul arts. Right? Granted, you won't really be able to do the same enhancement that a soul arts user would be able to do in terms of durability wise, but you can still go about it by power wise, like striking somebody's soul directly. Right? You can still infuse your soul arts into your attacks. If that makes sense. Yeah, I can see it. The Aura Arts doesn't have as much of as a branch or branches that, say, a magic user has, nor a soul arts user has. It's more of an offensive focused tree rather than utility, because Aura Arts doesn't really have any utility, let's be honest. I guess it depends on what you have. Let's say if you're a metal user, you can make an iron suit around yourself. Yeah, there's a bunch of different ones you can go around. Typically speaking, yeah, it does branch. You have the main tree, and you have 2 other side trees that you can go down. Sub-trees. Meanwhile, on the magic side, you can go down elemental paths, controlling the elements, or dominating the elements. Going into conjuration, conjuring stuff, summoner. You can be a summoner. You can alter some of the elements as well. You can go into alteration, conjuration, or the elements and souls. There's no contract you can have for order arts either. It's just all you, all yourself. Back to the soul, you have talismans that you can utilize for tools. You can have demonic weapons, sealing things inside weapons, using it that way as well. That'd be more the dominating side for the soul arts. Now boons, though, the side piece. Boons would be different because they can grant you something completely opposite of what you are, right? Because if you're an aura arts user and you get a boon, say it is a god of lightning, and they give you a lightning boon. It allows you to shrink down your foes with lightning, or control lightning, while you're an earth aura arts user. But you'll still have access to that boon, because that's the god. But again, boons might make you more powerful, but they lock you out of ever ascending into divinity. And you can have multiple boons, but not from different gods. You can only get boons from the same god. Like you can gain favor from the same god to gain more boons on top of that boon that you already have. If that makes sense. Like, say, Aki would give boons, right? It would primarily just be upon getting access to the stars that he has. Or I guess you can say he can give you a gravity control boon. But I don't think you'd really want that, because then it would draw upon your life force. Ideally, it would just be, since he's pretty much a living generator, just access to different forces. Yeah, pretty much for boons. Boons, it really just depends on the god. Like, if you get a boon from Thor, it would just mainly be a lightning. Lightning and strength. Storm god. Same thing with Zeus. Unless they give you a worthless boon, because they're vindictive. Really depends on the god. The boons are a lot harder to really go over than the power system that we have.